2020, Norris said Hamilton's car should win every race. He only has to beat 2 drivers. No,
Lando, you've only got to beat 1 driver, and that's your teammate. There's zero shame in having the quickest car. Now, it's my job as the driver to make sure I'm winning every single race. And it's just not happening. I think that's why he gets a bit defensive about it. There's no way this quote hasn't come back to haunt him, by the way.
Well, that's probably why he keeps saying that he doesn't have the fastest car.
Well, everyone, we took 1 week off. Sorry, I was away. We missed the Bahrain Grand Prix, but if you do listen to Racecast... Oh, no, the Cardinals. Let's start again. Well, welcome back, everyone, to Box Podcast. We did obviously take last week off. That was my bad. But if you listen to us, you'll know that I explained I was away and there was just no physical way that we could have recorded. But we are back after the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix. Don't worry, we're not going to sit here and talk about Bahrain. It's been and gone. We're over it. Welcome along. Wherever you are listening to us, make sure you do give us a 5-star rating because it makes a massive difference to us and the podcast. It really does help us out. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you hit like, subscribe, and comment down below if you disagree or agree with any of the points that we make throughout this podcast. Also, if you do want your exclusive discount to get 30% off your Box Ultra subscription, then do use the link in the description. It is also free to download if you just want to download it and test it out and then upgrade at a later date. But we do highly recommend that you do so. Saudi Arabia. Now...
Hang on. Firstly, before we get on to Saudi Arabia, right, it's your birthday today.
Oh, today is my birthday. So if you're listening... Oh, shit. Oh, I just swore. Sorry. Yeah, the audio goes up today.
It does.
Okay, so if you're listening to us on Monday, the 21st of April, it is actually my birthday. I turned 21. And,
I was 22 earlier. Happy birthday, Luke. Happy birthday. I didn't get you a present because you categorically told me not to get you a present.
Not getting me a present is a present.
You're welcome.
You know, like, I don't want... You know, people get presents and it's just like... Oh, what I don't like the idea of is, you know, oh, if you're going to get me a present, let me tell you what I want. I'd rather just not have a present. And it's like, why don't we just, you know... Should we get dinner or a drink? I don't want people going out and being like, oh, he might like this. I won't. I don't want useless junk in my house. I've got everything I want. You know, I don't like presents. Unless, I've spoken to Ruth and she's like, oh, I want to get you something. And I was like, oh, well, I really like this. Oh, I'll get that for you. Great. But, like, it's horrible to do that with everyone, you know, like, right, none, get me this. Like, I just think, like, oh, don't worry, don't get me anything. You know, I'm 29 now, sadly. I have everything I want. I just, see me on my birthday, can have a chat, have a drink, eat some food. That's good. That's
do
good
a podcast.
Yeah, that, not quite the birthday present I was after, but here we are.
But no, happy birthday.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. It's not something I feel like I enjoy really celebrate. It doesn't get me down, so to speak, but it doesn't really mean much to me, my birthday anymore. Used to be sick when I was like 10 and you get like loads of presents.
And now it's like, I think the older you get though, you basically get what you want throughout the year. So when you get to your birthday, you've kind of got everything. You're kind of just getting presents for the sake of getting presents.
I really don't enjoy the concept of getting presents is cool, but when it's something that you want, like I got a smokeless fire pit from my parents because they were like, I had spoken about it before, but before they were like, oh, we want to get you a birthday present. Like, should we get you the fire pit that you were talking about? I hadn't mentioned getting it for my birthday or anything. Yeah. I just said I had wanted it. And I was like, yeah, that would be sick. Like, I'd love that. It's like, that is cool. But other than that, yeah, I think, don't buy me presents for my birthday.
There you go.
Not that any of you are ever planning on doing so. Oh, shit, we were sending fan mail. Never happened and never will. But
Joe from Milton Keynes is livid now because, they've just sent it.
Yeah, can you send it to the return address, please? But yeah, Saudi Arabia. Let's talk business. Do you feel that Saudi Arabia is a track that has been set up to fail based on the fact that the 2021 race was so intense and we are never, ever, ever going to have anything like that ever again?
I suppose yes, because we were treated, that whole season in general, we were treated to something spectacular. you then had the Saudi race. That was the penultimate race of the season. That's where Lewis, equaled the points heading into Abu Dhabi.
Mm-hmm.
And there was so much drama. You had the red flags. You had Lewis going into the back of Max. You had the Max pushing Lewis off into turn 1.
You're trying to kill him.
Yeah. But there was so much drama in that. Since then, I think, I suppose when you have gone to Saudi...
I mean, we had 2022 was a great Saudi race.
It was, yeah.
And I feel like it's always a spectacular track to watch the cars go around, particularly qualifying. I think it's it's a track that really takes you back, and it's like, wow, these guys are going so quick, and it's millimeters. That's the difference.
It's such a good track. It's one of my favourites.
It is, but I feel like the race was okay. We've had a couple of boring ones this season.
I was actually really surprised because we had the safety car in lap 1 with Tsunoda and Gasly, and I thought to myself, okay, there's going to be maybe some red flags here. There's going to be some more safety cars. After that, we didn't have anything.
Do you know what? I was speaking to someone about this yesterday. We need to you need to sprinkle in a Mazepin, a Latifi, a Maldonado. I think genuinely we've got such a high standard of drivers on the grid.
Well, to be fair, I thought Doohan was going to be one of those, but he's done all right.
Yeah, I think all 20 drivers are very decent drivers, and I know you'll probably laugh because you'll be thinking of someone like Lance Stroll, who, do you know what record he broke this weekend?
Do you want me to tell you?
Yeah, well, tell the guys at home.
The most Q1 exits in F1 history. I think it was 75 Q1 exits in his career.
And we'll touch on that just after this, but we've genuinely got such a good standard of driver. We've always said Lance Stroll is a fine F1 driver, and I don't mean fine in like necessarily a complimentary way, but I don't mean it as a derogatory term.
He's a talented driver. Anyone who can drive these cars at their speeds.
But he's not someone that bins it all the time or causes chaos or crashes. We haven't got anyone that is just a bit of a shithouse, and I feel like we need it.
No, you
need it back.
You had the Latifis, the Mick Schumachers. Mick Schumacher crashed a lot. Monaco, Saudi, obviously Mazepins. So you don't have that now, because I think the drivers that are on the grid are that just step up. Even the likes of Bortoletto, even the rookies that have come in aren't crashing.
They're all doing very good jobs as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. All the rookies have come in and been you would say Doohan's probably been the worst out of them, and I say that in the same sentence of saying I think they've all done really well. Yeah,
I mean, you could say Bortoletto, but that Sauber is basically nowhere.
That's such an unfair.
No, that's what I mean. When you're looking on paper, Bortoletto is the worst rookie on the grid, but you take it in context with the actual cars that they're driving. You look at Alpine, what Gasly's doing compared to what Doohan is doing. It's such a big difference.
Yeah, and that's not to say we expect Jack Doohan should be doing what Gasly is doing, because Gasly is very experienced.
Yeah.
He's driven for Red Bull. He had a successful time at AlphaTauri as well. He did a good job. That he won a race. And I just think we've got such a good standard of driver now. We need someone to go in there and fuck shit up.
But I think also, just going back to what you said about Saudi, and we're obviously treated in 2021. These cars are so big for this type of track that overtaking is very difficult.
But it does make me wonder, right? They have opportunity to make these cars smaller in the regulations, as in when they overhaul them. The cars have been too big really for a good number of years, and I'm talking, moving into the turbo hybrid era, and I know why. Obviously, because you need more space. You've got to fit a hybrid unit in there and everything. So, but there has to be a way where they can make the cars smaller now. The only
they are. You come 2026.
Yeah, but then they are a little bit smaller, but they are not small. The cars are still massive.
Yeah. Okay.
Like if you compared them to, let's say, Fernando Alonso's 2006 Renault.
Yeah.
That would be absolutely dwarfed by even the 2026 cars.
True.
correct me if I'm wrong, because it absolutely might be. Other than like the two obvious places that you can overtake, being last, the back straight, and the pit straight into turn one, only one overtake on a different part of the track.
Yeah, obviously
from the boys that were racing up front, you had Oscar overtake Lewis.
Phenomenal overtake.
Great overtake, but we should be seeing overtakes like that frequently.
Yeah, majority of the overtakes came down the main straight, and I think, you know, I mean, what was it? 4 of the overtakes were from Lewis and Lando just by the DRS.
Yeah, well,
playing the DRS game.
Each other, yeah.
So yeah, there wasn't massive amount of overtakes. You left your water.
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't the greatest race. I still enjoyed it. I like the track.
I thought look, the worst thing we can do, as you know, box hosts, is come and complain about every race, because this was actually a good race. You know, you had a bit of drama. You had obviously the lap 1 incident between Gasly and Tsunoda, old friends. You had Max up to his old tricks again. And you had the stuff between Lewis and Lando, which, by the way, I can't believe Lando fell for that twice. That was just incredible. But it certainly was not a bad race. That's not what I'm saying. But it just feels more and more frustrating that it's like, I feel like we're not getting the action we deserve as fans.
Yeah, I get your point. See, for me, I just looked at it a bit different yesterday, because I just find it so mad that these drivers can race at that pace in a track like this. I just enjoyed actually just seeing
and that's the thing. It's the spectacle of what's going on is quality at a track like Saudi. But I don't know. I just think, I really, really hope these 2026 regulations bring something a little bit more to the racing. Like I say, it's not always going to be electric, and you're not always going to have a 2021 season. You're not always going to have constant battles on track. That is absolutely fine. But I still felt like it was a little bit like a bit samey.
Bit meh.
Well, it was just a little bit predictable, really.
I disagree with you to a certain extent, because if it was predictable, Lando would have easily got P2 or P1. I think...
Yeah, but you see, I think it's predictable that he didn't get it.
Well, yeah, okay. I didn't think it was that bad. I like the fact that Charles Leclerc had the pace. He really went off. He really took it to Lando towards the end. I think there was obviously the Williams tactical...
Yeah, which was great.
Which was good to see. Max and Oscar drama. Oscar, you know, he took it to Max, and this is the first time in a while we've seen someone actually take it to Max Verstappen and not.
But you say that it was turn 1 where they both went in there. After that, there wasn't any racing between the pair of them. And that's kind of my point. It was all, and look, we'll touch on every team like we normally do as we move forward. But just as a summary, I just want to see just a touch more. And when I say predictable, I don't even necessarily mean purely how the race ended, but I mean like every overtake was predictable.
You knew down the main straight that if they did DRS, you're going to overtake, yeah.
And I know you're probably going to say, oh, that's a bit contradictory. You say, people overtake, you complain. People don't overtake, you complain. I just think it would be nice if we had more opportunities than just the 2 DRS straights to overtake. Every time an overtake happened, it was predictable. Because like you say, if they were within DRS, close enough into that final corner, they were going to overtake them, and there was nothing they could do about it.
Yeah. You got about 6 tenths into that last corner, you're going to get it.
I also, the other week we spoke about a rule.
Yep.
One rule that you hate in F1.
Yep.
I figured it out.
Yep.
Having DRS to overtake back markers. Ridiculous.
Oh, you don't like it?
It gives you such an advantage on the car behind. You know, if they're closing in, you're coming up to a back marker, DRS. Why? You've been so quick that you've put a whole lap on this guy, and all of a sudden they need DRS to help them overtake. No, I'm not having it. I decided I hate that rule. It's rubbish. To me, that interferes more with the race than a back marker ever could.
Yeah.
So, why don't we just give them an extra 20 kilometers an hour down the straight to overtake someone who they've already put a whole lap on? Stupid. I can't believe I didn't think of it the other week.
Let us know what your thoughts are. Do you like that or do you not? Do drop a comment. Right. Should we get into the teams? Let's break down, shall we? So let's start off. Let's go Sauber. Tough weekend for them. Bortoleto P18, Hulkenberg P15.
I think they're going to have a lot of tough weekends.
Yeah.
They'll know that.
I think when you break it down for Bortoleto, yes, okay, he's finishing last and all of this stuff. It is just gaining that experience for next year. He's going to these tough tracks. We actually, majority he hasn't raced before. He's going there. He's getting that experience in. He's not DNFing.
Yeah.
And that's the main thing. And I think he's going to learn a lot from these weekends in preparation for next year. And like we touched on earlier, I don't think he's done a bad job as a rookie coming in. So
it's too unfair to judge him on performances. You've kind of just got to. You have to judge him based off his consistency and his, his deliverability. Is he actually getting the track? Is he getting the car to the checkered flag? Or is he binning it in the wall? If he'd put it in the wall 3 out of the 5 races, you'd be like, yeah, granted the car's bad, but, Hulk's driving it all right.
Yeah.
You're not expecting points from this Sauber.
No, and I think they've already...
Everyone knows it's a 2026 car.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people at the beginning, when they picked up points in Australia, they were like, okay, this Sauber may not be as bad. Obviously, it's circumstantial with how they got those points. Sauber last year didn't get points until literally, second to last race, third to last race with Zhou.
Yeah.
So I think, they've got points on the board. I think they'll take that, and I think they'll continue. They've got 2 very good drivers. Obviously, F2 world champion last year in Bortoleto. Hulkenberg, a very experienced driver. And we know once he gets that car and he gets to the competitive car, he can deliver. We've seen that. Yeah. We've seen what he's done with Haas. So this year will be a lot about learning, getting used to the car in preparation for Audi next year. I think they did exactly what they needed to do. They brought the car home, no damage cost.
And I think that's low key the target for Sauber this season is, can we keep our damage costs as low as possible? Yeah. Because points are irrelevant at this stage. Look, I would imagine they're not even developing this year's car. There might be very minor things, but what is the point? I'm pretty sure there's no way they could have done anything last season. The car was so bad. They're changing hands. They're going to be Audi from 2026. It's just just keep damage costs as low as possible. Let everyone get the laps in. Do all the work on the simulator for 2026, and kick ahead for the new regulations.
I agree. Alpine. So Jack Doohan went out in Q1, P17. Gasly got into Q3. Gasly's taken that car, and I know we'll touch on the race in a second. It was unfortunate for him, but another Q3 entry for Gasly. He's taken that Alpine slowly but surely in the right direction.
Yep.
Jack Doohan, obviously going out in Q1, he ended up finishing, where did he finish? P17 in the race. Look, there's ways to look at it. He's still a rookie. He's still getting this experience behind him. He finished a race. But I would have probably expected more from that Alpine yesterday. And I do think if Gasly remained in the race, they would have got points.
Yeah, and I think, look, if it continues in this fashion, he will be gone after summer. And because they have got Colapinto sitting in the ranks who... he did come in up against Alex Albon, and he did perform very well alongside him. He put in a good shift. And so, the argument would be, well, if he can do it alongside Alex Albon, he should be all right to do it against Gasly. And I feel like the gap between the two will likely not be as big as what we're seeing with Doohan and Gasly. And yeah, it's a shame because I wanted it to work out for him. But, you know, like I said at the beginning, I think out of the rookies, he is the most underperforming. I think all of them are doing a pretty decent job, to be honest. But when you've got Colapinto sitting, you know, in the background as he is, your days are going to be numbered if you're not, at least, if he was matching Gasly, he'd be safe because they'd be like, well, you know, if he's getting in Q3 or he's getting very close to Q3, we shouldn't make any changes. But there's a big gap.
And we've said before, haven't we, Briatore is not a patient man. He wants results. And Martin Brundle, and I don't know if you saw the grid walk before, he caught up with him. He said, what's the aim today? And he said, P6. So that's obviously before Pierre crashed, but that was what their aims were. And when you've got Jack Doohan finishing P17, obviously Gasly going out, you're going to be looking at it going, well, our aim today was points. We've come away with nothing this weekend.
And it's the old Verstappen-Perez situation of where you can't just rely on one driver, especially, you know, Max was fine because he was further up the field. If you're in the middle of the pack, you're much more likely to be involved in an incident.
Yeah.
And if that happens and you've only got one driver, you need the other to be there or thereabouts to be able to pick up those points.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if it's looking like at the moment that Jack Doohan is always going to be there. And like I say, he would be given time if, number one, they had a patient team principal, and if, number two, they didn't have Colapinto waiting in the wings. So it's an unfortunate situation. But on the incident, Gasly, Tsunoda, what were your thoughts?
Look, it was, in my opinion, it was Yuki's fault. But I feel like Gasly could have, you know, he got overtaken, then he tried to go again at him. I felt like Gasly could have avoided that.
So that's kind of my opinion on it. I feel like he probably should have used his experience there to think, this is going to be incredibly hard. You got to remember that corner, you know, tight left turn, that kind of, you know, you open into the right hand side, and
it was very compact, and
it always would have been very hard for Yuki to stay out of the way, I think. And I think it was nothing more than a racing incident, the lap one. But I feel like Gasly could have avoided it. I'm not saying I blame him for going for it, because you only get very few opportunities, especially when you're an Alpine in a position to overtake a Red Bull. But I think it's the Carlos Sainz situation where he's thinking, actually, I have to pick and choose who I race now at this point. And would Pierre Gasly have taken what? It would have left him P9. Had he?
Well, he started P9, so he was going for the overtake on Tsunoda, who was P8.
Good.
So, but obviously, it looked like Gasly was going to get ahead out of turn one, and then offside Tsunoda was on the inside.
But then, if you say to Gasly now, would you take P9, or would you risk that overtake for a 50-50? You'd probably just say, I'll take P9 and be safe. You don't need to be a hero when you're driving an Alpine.
No.
Or if you're driving a Williams. The hero's role is to just collect those P9s, P10s. And, you know, if you're ever in a situation where you can get lucky and maybe, you know, get like a P5 or whatever, because circumstantially. But I just feel like it wasn't the move to make at that point. On that track, where it's so tight.
It's very... That first four corners is so compact.
You've got all the cars so close to each other.
And you've seen instances in the past. Do you remember Sergio Perez, Nikita Mazepin, even, was it Tsunoda or Mick Schumacher down there as well? They've had crashes down there in the past. It is such a tight corner because the car on the inside is always going to come over to try and get the entry into the corner. So when you're trying to have too wide there, it is always putting the car at risk.
That's the thing you've got to remember, like that left turn, like you're taking a certain amount of speed. Yuki can't just hook it like right round to the wall. Do you know what I mean?
You have a bit of understeer and you're gone.
Exactly, and I think that's where I just think Gasly should have thought, this is a great opportunity, but it might not be worth the risk.
like you say, it was a racing incident.
100. I don't think it was anyone's fault.
Obviously, I felt sorry for Yuki as well. We'll talk about Red Bull in a second, but yeah, do let us know. Was it Gasly's fault or was it Yuki's fault? Do drop a comment, or was it just a racing incident? Where should we go next?
I mean, we can just go to Red Bull if you want off the back of that.
Yeah,
because obviously we talk about Yuki. It's not been the dream start to his Red Bull career.
It hasn't. However, I'm starting to. I feel Yuki will be okay because, again, take away the race itself, another Q3 entry this weekend, and look, I know some people will say, well, yeah, he should be doing that, but you should have said that about Perez last year. Perez.
Oh no, last year it was the car.
Yeah, it was definitely
They were sabotaging Perez.
Yuki, obviously, when he was in Japan, it was tough. He went out in Q2 there. The last couple of races, he's actually started to look a bit more comfortable in the car. In Bahrain, he wasn't that far off Max. He actually did a right job. This weekend, there was obviously a massive gap. Obviously, Max on pole, Yuki down in P8. But Yuki did enough. He got into Q3. He seems to be getting a bit more comfortable in the car. So I was really looking forward to seeing what he could do in the race yesterday. There is apparently... Yuki is doing some testing in Silverstone this week as well in the RB21.
The RB19.
RB19.
Which was obviously the 2023 car.
Yeah. So it's good for Yuki. I think Christian Horner is relatively... They spoke to him about Yuki and how he's doing. Christian Horner seems relatively happy with what Yuki is doing.
Yep.
And I think out of all the people who have been in that car recently, Sergio, Lawson, Yuki seems to be gradually going along.
He seems fine. Look, he's not had the most electric start, but I also don't think he's had the worst start.
He's done better than Lawson.
Yeah, not a difficult feat though. In fairness,
No.
That's but yeah, there is going to come a point where you need to see Yuki in the mix with those boys at the front. He'll get the whole season. Yeah. Unless things go diabolically wrong, he will get the whole season. But if he wants to stay on next season, he is absolutely going to have to start.
Yeah.
He hasn't got loads of time to get there. So the season will go quick.
And Red Bull aren't patient.
No. And I really hope he does.
Yeah.
You know, you're never going to expect him to be Max Verstappen. That's fine. They don't need two Max Verstappens.
No.
They just need someone that is going to be... You know, Yuki hasn't battled the Ferraris, the Mercedes yet. Obviously, the McLarens are always too far ahead, but Max has been battling them. And it should be thereabouts.
Yeah.
And it hasn't been yet, so he has got to get there. I want to see more from him in Miami, if I'm honest.
No, I would agree with you on that. Let's talk about Max Verstappen. I have to say...
Old habits die hard.
Let's just recap to qualifying on Saturday.
Unbelievable.
What a qualifying session. That was the first time in a long time I've been on the edge of my seat because you've got three different cars, constructors, going for pole position. You've got George Russell actually gets a lap record. Then Oscar Piastri comes through, gets the lap record. And all of a sudden Max Verstappen comes through an unbelievable lap to put him on pole. You had four different constructors on the first two rows for this weekend. And Max Verstappen is interesting because obviously in Bahrain, they struggled. They really struggled.
Yeah.
And coming into this...
toys out the pram a little bit.
Yeah.
Said I'm moving to Aston Martin.
They're heading into Saudi. There's a lot of worry, actually. Is this car actually that good? Is it not? That car's not a bad car. And Max...
I don't think it is a bad car, right? But I really don't think it's a car that that should be winning races.
No.
It's just my opinion. I think if you put anyone else in that car, it doesn't get anywhere near
100%.
Where Max is taking it.
And I did a video on that on Saturday saying anyone else, that Red Bull should be nowhere near pole position.
And it's not a shitbox. It's absolutely not a shitbox, you know, but I don't think it's necessarily quicker than the Mercedes. I don't think it's definitively better than the Ferrari. It's nowhere near the McLaren, and we'll talk about Lando's comments when we come on to McLaren. But if you've got Max Verstappen in the car, it's like adding an extra, 50 horsepower just by having him in there.
But it was
like a cheat code.
It was a phenomenal lap.
Yeah, it was.
And obviously everyone talks back to 2021, the lap that never happened, or
the lap that could have been.
You knew he loves this track. He maximizes as much as he can from that lap. And I've said this before in the podcast a couple of weeks ago. The great thing about Max Verstappen is he builds his way into the weekend. Okay, he's up there in like the top 3 or 4 on P1, P2, P3 and all that stuff. And then when it matters the most,
he delivers.
He delivers. And it's not just him who's delivering, it's the team. The team strategy this weekend, obviously they had the red flag, obviously due to Lando. They knew they put Max out there with higher fuel, get him to do 2 quick laps, and it worked a treat. It was really well executed. And Red Bull is so good at that. They're so good at that.
They are. They're, I think we've said it for a long time. They've got the best strategy department, for sure. They've got the best driver, for sure. They don't have the best car, for sure. But if 2 out of the 3 parts are moving, and like we say, the car's not bad.
No.
It's certainly not a bad car. Yeah, Max will drag that to wins. And I said it about George Russell. Don't write him off for the championship. Certainly don't write off Max Verstappen for this championship, because he's a 4-time world champion for a reason, and he could definitely be a 5-time world champion by the end of the season.
Phenomenal lap. Let's get into the race with Max. Turn 1. Okay,
Max, there's no need. You're better than that.
I feel this is where Red Bull don't always make the right decisions. I know we've just told them that they do make the right decisions, but when there's certain decisions, they don't always. When Max went into turn 1, he was not ahead. Christian Horner has come out and actually sat there with press going, here's a photo of Max. Well, you're always going to be ahead if you're going to brake late.
Yeah, if you're not going to brake, at some point you are going to be ahead, right? That is just how it works. It's like if we are both running in a straight line and we have to stop at 20 meters and I just carry on running and then being like, oh, well, look, I was ahead.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because you just didn't stop.
But it was classic Max Verstappen. You could have easily put money on that. Max would either go off into turn 1 or just brake really late. One or the other, you would have, and your money would have been safe.
As soon as he saw Oscar was alongside him, I knew it was coming. And 2021 flashbacks hit me like a brick.
And it was interesting because they got the 5-second penalty. In my opinion, what would have been better is they just kind of gave the place back. And I know a lot of people will say, well, actually, if he gave the place back, he would have been in dirty air behind Oscar. That would have damaged his tyres and that may have affected his race. And you're right in saying that. The issue is they got the 5-second penalty. Max Verstappen only finished 2 seconds behind Oscar at the end of the race.
Yeah, Max.
I still think Oscar would have won it, but
number one, that penalty's not harsh enough. Because now Oscar's got to drive in the dirty air for however many laps it was. Max gets to drive off in clean air. We know that's easier. It's better for the tyres. And then you give him a 5-second penalty, which Lawson then got 10 seconds for it later on in the race.
That wasn't even... I'm going to stand up for Lawson here. He didn't go off.
But it wasn't even... And the thing is he was so far ahead anyway. It wasn't like he gained an advantage by going off. It must have been about him rejoining the track in the way that he did. But the double standards, and I'm sorry, they set this precedent in 2021 when they were not punishing absolutely outrageous driving. And I've said it before, it's the one element of Max Verstappen's game, so to speak, that I don't like. I don't think he needs to do it.
Well,
He's so quick. If he had just given Oscar that position back, he could have absolutely come back at him at some point.
Well, I did a video on it last night, posted about it on TikTok. Go and check us out on TikTok and Instagram. And there's a few comments. Some of them, so We can all speculate, but the stewards have the telemetry and the data doesn't lie. They were lenient. Max knew what he was doing and then doesn't like it, so he goes into his usual sulk when he gets found out.
True.
Lewis said it was fair. Max tried his luck, didn't pay off. I'm sure he will bounce back next race. Even if Max kept it on the brakes, he would have to cut the corner as Oscar wasn't leaving the space. Yeah, I know Max has often done this in the past.
But what does he mean Oscar wasn't leaving the space?
It was in my opinion, it was Oscar's corner. He was there.
There's room
he had
for one car.
Yeah.
In that corner, right? And Oscar was ahead at the apex, which the apex is on the left, right? It's a left, then a right. Max was only ahead in that picture that Windsor Spice was showing everyone because he didn't brake.
Windsor Spice?
Yeah.
I like that. A couple other comments. Max knew exactly what he was doing. The FIA should have made him give the place back. The 5 seconds is not a proper punishment. Red Bull tried to exploit the rules by trying to make up the 5 seconds. And Gemma says they should have given the place back. Lando had to do the same last year when it was between Max and Lando. And Phil said if the runoff area had been gravel, Max wouldn't have come off the brakes and he'd be following Oscar into turn 2.
Yeah, it's an absolutely fair point. And look, I get it. It's part of Max's. It's how he races, but I don't think it's necessary. And I get it. Like, you know, when he comes on the radio after and he says stuff, that is obviously part of the game as well.
Everyone does it. Yeah.
If he came on and said, "Oh yeah, no, I just went too deep there. That was my fault," like, it's not gonna like bode well for him. It's not gonna go in his favor. So I get it. Like, obviously, it winds you up as fans when you listen. But, can he just stop doing stuff like that?
Well, Max, you could tell he was livid afterwards because he didn't want to talk...
in the interview with David Coulthard.
Yeah, I mean, it's David Coulthard. He didn't want to talk to David Coulthard.
He's a Red Bull legend.
David Coulthard loves Red Bull, doesn't he? He doesn't say anything bad about anyone else.
He's still part of the Red Bull.
So he didn't want to speak to him at all. And actually, I kind of like it from Max. You know, he was actually really respectful. Yeah, thank you to all the crowd for being here. It's great. Don't want to say anymore.
Yeah, and look, I've never really minded Max's attitude to stuff. No. I think
maybe in 2021 we hated it, but actually, he's grown on me.
It's just that's the one element of his racing that I just don't like. I just think you're so quick.
Yeah,
it's just not even necessary. It just makes you look like you don't know how to race people wheel to wheel.
Do let us know what your thoughts are on it. Should he have given the place back? Was the 5 seconds lenient enough or too harsh? Or should he got a 10 second like maybe Lawson did? That Lawson penalty is just ridiculous.
Takes piss.
It does. Right, where should we go next? Should we go Haas?
Yeah,
we'll quickly touch on Haas. So Behrman qualified P15, Ocon down in P19. And then in the race, Behrman 13th, Ocon 14th. They were pretty much nowhere this weekend.
It was a bit of a... Yeah, like you say, it was a bit of a nowhere weekend for them.
So I think for them, you're not too worried about Haas. I think they've shown already enough in the last few races that they will be there and about.
It's when you're Haas, when you're Williams, at this point in their Alpine, it's not about picking up points every race.
No.
It's just making sure that you do pick up some points in some races. So I don't think Haas are going to be worried by this weekend.
They're finishing. And the reason, it may sound really strange when I'm saying that, but they're finished in these races. You look last year, okay, Magnussen crashed a lot.
He did.
They've had in the previous years, Nikita Mazepin, they've had Mick Schumacher crash a lot. They've now got 2 drivers in Ocon, and, Hülkenberg did crash last year, granted, Monaco, for example, and, Ocon crashed in previous years. But when you look at this year, Behrman seems to be more at one with the car. He seems to be relatively consistent. Ocon, again, is just getting those laps under the belt, getting used to the car in preparation for next year. They're a new team pairing. I think they're doing a good job.
Yeah, I think Haas are just quietly going about their business. There's nothing... I wouldn't be worried.
No.
If I was Ayo Komatsu.
But I've been very impressed with Ollie Behrman. And again, I know he finished ahead of Ocon yesterday, but there were different strategies. He was asked to Ocon was asked to let Behrman past. I mean, you take that as what it is. But I've been really impressed with Behrman. Another race finish, more experience, more laps in the bag. He's doing a solid job.
Yeah. Look, it's a fine weekend for Haas. If they get both cars over the line, there's always opportunity for them to pick up points next week.
Yeah, RB. Liam Lawson out-qualified Hadjar on Saturday. P12, Hadjar P14.
They've got a good little thing going on. RB.
And I think, Hadjar picking up a point yesterday for RB again. He's really, really impressing me. Like, I think when you look at Hadjar and what he's done, you look at, as I said before, when you look at the start of the season, he didn't even start the race in Australia, and a lot of drivers their head would drop, their confidence would go, and they would be nowhere. However, he's turned that around and he's been so consistent. I'm really impressed with Hadjar. I think he's done a great job, and he is outperforming Lawson.
Yeah, no, I mean Hadjar's been great. He's in my opinion, one of the top rookies that has come in.
Yeah, some nice little banging out there. But yeah, picking up a point yesterday for RB, really impressive, really solid. Lawson finished P12 again. When you look at it, he's 10 seconds behind Hadjar, and he will be because that's not even including the 10-second penalty, so it's even more than that. So yeah, solid weekend for RB. Again, more laps under the belt. They're doing all right.
Yeah, and look, obviously if we talk about RB, we should talk about Liam Lawson and everything he's gone through.
Yeah.
I don't know if you see them on socials. They look like a very happy little family team. And it is, it's different because, and I really don't mean this disrespectfully, but they're never going to be as serious as like a Ferrari or a Mercedes or a Red Bull for obvious reasons. They're the sister team of, and I don't mean they're a joke of a team at all, but I mean, Liam Lawson obviously went into the Red Bull environment, which is ultra high pressure. Didn't work out for him, lost his seat, could have absolutely capitulated. I think he's gone into a really good team. They look like they've got great spirit. They have fun. He looks at home there. And I think, despite Hadjar outperforming him, I do think they've got a really good pairing there in Lawson and Hadjar.
But I've said this before, haven't I? RB are one of those teams that are really good. They're the perfect team for Lawson to go back into. They nurture their drivers.
They're a nurture team. Yeah.
You look at Gasly, okay? Gasly's done so well because he's gone into that team and they've nurtured him. They've looked after him. They've supported him. Yuki's done so well in his career because even when he first came in, he was crashing. He wasn't great. He was struggling.
He was angry as well.
He was angry. They've nurtured him. They've built him up. And that's why he's in the Red Bull seat. Yeah. So Lawson going back there, and you could say the same for people like Hadjar. They've looked after him. Lawson, when he worked his first couple of stints there, the reason why he did so well is because he was in a team that they looked after him.
Yeah.
RB is a very good team for that, and I think Lawson going back there is a perfect environment for him. It's away from that pressure. They're there. They look after him. They do exactly what they need to do, and you hear that in the team radios that come over. The one that came over with Hadjar yesterday, really impressive. Hadjar, even in practice was complaining about something. That's fine. Don't worry about it. It's all good. Don't panic. Yeah. We'll go again. It's that looking after the drivers. And if I was going to be a driver, I wouldn't mind going there.
Good team to be at if you're young.
Yeah.
I would still be concerned if I was Liam Lawson, thinking, is there ever a way out of this team? Is there ever a way to a top team? Because
the answer would be no.
Well, you've never seen a driver go back to AlphaTauri, Red Bulls, Racing Bulls, whatever, and then make it to a top team.
In my opinion, the answer is Liam Lawson will never be in a top team again. I just can't see it. If he had gone back into this RB and he was getting into points week in, week out, outperforming Hadjar, taking that car to the best it could be, then I'd be like, okay, maybe.
But yeah, because if you're Red Bull now, you're thinking, well, actually, maybe we're looking to Hadjar at some point, not anytime soon. I don't think he's ready for that. And, they've still got Yuki, who I really like to think will succeed. But they might be looking to Hadjar as that sort of, eventually he's going to... I think they would be overlooking Lawson at this point.
And at this moment in time, Hadjar is the better driver.
Yeah.
Lawson... I expected Lawson to go into that red RB team and be outperforming Hadjar from day one.
Well, but it makes sense, if you dropped Lewis Hamilton from Ferrari into a Haas, you would expect him to be outperforming the other driver.
And I know some people might say, oh, well, yeah, had you had time over the winter with RB? Well, Lawson had been with him for 2 stints and still come in and did a very good job.
Yeah, no, there's no excuses. But I would also stress, I don't think Lawson's doing a bad job.
No. Aston Martin, again, another tricky weekend for them. Stroll went out in Q1 for the 75th time in his career.
That is impressive.
Alonso qualified P13. But the race, I mean, look, Stroll P16, Alonso P11. Another tough weekend for Aston Martin.
But I still think... And look, we had good words to say about Lance Stroll at the beginning of the season.
He was outperforming Alonso, which...
He's done a U-turn.
Do you think we cursed him?
Yeah, I think we may have. He's back to his old self. This is seriously got to stop for Aston Martin if they are serious about their ambitions. Look, Fernando Alonso, he's old enough to be my dad. You know, he's 45 years old. Granted, he would have been a young dad, but it happens. He is still doing all right in that car.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like he should, at this age, he should be the Lance Stroll, right? And you've got a young man, kind of young, Lance Stroll, experienced F1 driver, very experienced F1 driver. I mean, he's got a stat for most Q1 exits. You've got to have a lot of races under your belt to achieve a stat like that. He is just so not delivering. And I've spoken so highly about Aston Martin, about how ambitious... Lawrence Stroll, I think, is one of the best owners in the sport. Yeah. He's ambitious, investing billions.
I would disagree with that. You can't be ambitious if you're not willing to...
No, but this is my point. You take Lance out of it, unbelievable. We need the best car designer, Adrian Newey. 30 mil a year, here you go, have it. Right, we need our own wind tunnel, we need all this, let's invest, bang, 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 money, we're going to be the best, 2026, we're coming for you. Not with Lance in the car, you're not.
No.
And as harsh as it sounds, we sat here and started this podcast by saying we think all the drivers on the grid actually are pretty decent, that's why we're not seeing all these crashes. But you need to match that level of ambition that you're showing off the track, on the track. And I don't think, I think they could renew Fernando Alonso's contract because he's got one more year after this year. I would renew it. Don't get rid of him. He's not shown anything to suggest that he's not capable of battling at the top if you give him a car, right? Yeah. You need a teammate that is going to back that up, especially if you are going to fight in that midfield for a bit, because they should be collecting points every now and then. Yeah. And granted, the Aston Martin development has gone so wrong. Don't know how. Do think Alonso cursed it a little bit. You should have never said this the last time, you're not going to see me on the podium. But it's happened. Yeah. And now it's about, I firmly believe they're going to come into 2026 hot. Because they're doing everything right. There's no reason to suggest they're not going to do well in 2026.
But you need a right teammate alongside Fernando Alonso.
You need a driver that is going to be able to back up everything that the guys are working hard in the factory. Guys and girls in the factory are working so hard towards. And part of me thinks that it must be demoralising to the team having someone that just isn't extracting it. And Lance Stroll said about the car, he was like, well, if you take the 2 McLaren drivers and put them in a Sauber for their whole career, they'd probably break the record. And I just don't believe that's true. I had a racing point, which was, he came into Williams.
Yep.
Williams went awful at that point.
I mean, he didn't do too bad in Racing Point.
Went to Racing Point, but that car was decent. Aston Martin, it's not always been rosy, but Fernando Alonso isn't being slapped with that title, and he's been in F1 since like 2001.
That 23 season, Alonso took that car to the next level, got those podiums.
And that's why I think that's just a really bad comparison. We always say a good car needs a good driver, but if you put a good driver in a bad car, they'll still extract something from it.
Yeah.
And, I believe if Oscar Piastri or Lando Norris had, using Lance Stroll's example, if they had Lance Stroll's career cars, they wouldn't be having this record. No, not a chance.
No, I agree. Do let us know what your thoughts are on Aston Martin. Right, Williams, P6 qualifying for Carlos Sainz, 11th for Alex Albon. And
Carlos Sainz out qualifying Lewis Hamilton in the Ferrari whose seat he took must have been a good feeling.
Yeah. No. He did a very good job. And obviously Carlos Sainz finishing P8, Alex Albon P9. Look, there's a slight issue I have with Alex Albon this weekend. I like Alex, okay? Carlos Sainz was asked during the race to help Alex out get the DRS. He was under pressure from Isaac. And Carlos Sainz played the perfect team game. Alex Albon after basically came out and said, well, I don't think I necessarily needed the help. We had the pace in the car. I would have been okay. Accept the help. Do you know what I mean? Don't come out and be so...
It's a pride thing, isn't it? A lot of the F1 drivers are like this. And I think, sometimes they just need to take the chip off their shoulder. And just be like, actually, no, that was really helpful. You could always say, look, I'm not entirely sure Isaac would have got me, but having that as a security was great. We worked as a team.
Yeah.
But I do think they have shown good team spirit.
They have 6 points again this weekend. Solid weekend for Williams. Carlos Sainz, very solid drive.
He's starting to blossom a little bit into.
He's looking more confident in the car, which is good to see. And this is exactly what we were expecting of Carlos Sainz. So he lost a place on the first lap to Lewis.
But you kind of always expect that as well.
He wasn't in the race with the Ferraris. But again, Alex was saying before that they thought they were a challenge in the Ferraris this weekend. So I'm a bit like...
Where'd they get that from?
Well, he thought they had the pace. But no, Carlos Sainz looks like he's actually...
No one else thought that. It wasn't even presented to us.
He said it to Martin Brundle on the grid walk. So
they were never... Look, there is a clear gap between those front four teams and the rest of the pack.
Yeah.
Like I've said about Haas and Alpine, it's important that they are just there collecting those spare points that are always going.
Yeah.
They're not going to be racing those boys at all.
No. Should we get into Ferrari? By the way, I have quite a big thing to say about McLaren later, so do stay tuned. We're 50 minutes in, but do stay tuned. Very, very good weekend for Charles Leclerc. Another difficult weekend for Lewis Hamilton. The contrast between both of them is pretty staggering, because I think Charles Leclerc this weekend showed the actual real potential of the Ferrari, and Lewis Hamilton was nowhere near.
He was way off it. Oh, and it's so... It's a difficult watch.
I mean, he's pretty much 30 seconds behind his teammate, which...
That's the most unlike Lewis Hamilton thing ever.
It's embarrassing. I think another difficult Saturday for Lewis, P7, getting out qualified by a Williams when you got your teammate qualifying P4.
What I will say is Lewis has never looked spectacular at Saudi. Unless you look at 2021.
Yeah.
22, 23, 24.
Wasn't it Q1 he went out in 22 or something? Or 23?
Yeah. Yeah, I can't remember what year, but yeah, he's never looked good, so I don't want to take this as like, oh god, this is looking bad. But how can he go from winning the sprint race in China? It is in there somewhere, and he keeps talking about. He said he needed a brain transplant in order to. I think that's not the Lewis that the old Lewis would have would have found a way to make this work, and he wouldn't be. That sounds to me like he's doubting himself. I can't do it.
I feel like look, I'm a Lewis fan, but I feel like at this moment in time, he's just trying to make excuses for why it's not working. Don't get me wrong, he's being perfectly honest with what he's saying, that actually the car, he said afterwards, the car is obviously good.
Charles is getting a pole position. Yeah, and I do respect that he comes out. Pole
position? Do you mean a podium?
Podium, sorry. I do respect that, because he did come out and he said, I'm sure the fans aren't happy with my results. I'm sure the team aren't. I'm not. I know the bosses aren't. And it's fair. Like, look, it's all well and good having Lewis Hamilton at the team, because what he will do for you financially through PR, essentially, is incredible. But Lewis Hamilton is not just a PR man.
No.
He's a 7-time world champion.
And the Tifosi don't just want a PR man. They want someone to bring back titles to Ferrari.
And whether you think I'm crazy or not, I still believe Lewis Hamilton is someone who can do that. And he said that he's working hard in the background. And there's just got to be something. This can't be how Lewis Hamilton's career ends, because it's just not. It's not Lewis Hamilton.
I think 2026 will be a real eye-opener to see whether Lewis has still got it, because this era of cars has not suited Lewis. There's been glimmers of positivities, but overall, this era of car has been woeful for Lewis. He has not adapted well to this era of cars.
Yeah, whether you like it or not, you can't deny that.
No.
This whole ground effect era has been horrendous for him.
And, Lewis came out afterwards and said, nothing positive from today except for Charles finishing the podium, which is great for the team. On my end, it was horrible. It was horrible. Not enjoyable at all. I was just sliding around. First stint, massive understeer, car not turning, and then massive deg. And then the second stint, slightly better balance, but still just no pace. Yeah, pretty bad. And look, Lewis, I do believe Lewis Hamilton is already in damage limitations for this year. He's got to turn it around to come a bit closer to Charles Leclerc, because Charles Leclerc is outperforming him. He is showing better pace than Lewis. And if we get to race 10, 11, 12, and Lewis Hamilton is like 100 points behind Charles, that's going to be pretty embarrassing, because there was a lot of hype about Lewis. And, we're both sitting here going...
We were driving the bus. We were all aboard the hype bus.
But Lewis, I do feel, is in damage limitations already. He's got to turn it around quick. And 2026 will be a real eye-opener. If we get to 2026 and in this new era of cars and Lewis Hamilton is struggling... In all honesty, that's career over.
That would be his last season in F1.
And I hate to say that because I'm a Lewis fan. But you can't take away that actually you do not want to see... look at Sebastian Vettel, Michael Schumacher's. Look how their careers ended.
Yeah.
You don't want to see that for Lewis.
No, but this is the sad thing. Is I firmly believe if Lewis had won 21, he would have retired.
Yeah, maybe.
And look, we all know the unjust outcome of that.
I didn't tell you, did I? On F1 TV the other day, I watched the Saudi highlights from 2021. The contrast from that race to the last few races we've had there is mental. Yeah, and then I may have just watched Abu Dhabi 21 and it got me a bit more angry.
Yeah. No, I'm not watching that back.
No, I wouldn't recommend it.
It's ridiculous. But yeah, look, I'm not going to sit here and slander Lewis, but he needs to start turning it up. And I know it's not as easy as that, and he's come out and said all the things he's struggling with, but we need it. As fans, we need it.
I agree. Mercedes next?
Yeah, solid.
George Russell qualified P3, Antonelli P5. Look, I've been really impressed with Antonelli. He was, 7 seconds behind Russell come the end of the race yesterday.
Yeah, well, Russell had the But he really slowed down towards those last few laps because he had the
blistering on his tyre. But P5 for Russell, they weren't as strong as I was expecting. Potentially
P4 for Russell.
P5 for Russell.
No, Lando.
I was actually expecting Russell to be on the podium. So quite a.
You see, I wasn't expecting him to be on the podium because I was expecting Lando to be there. But again, I think Mercedes won't be unhappy with this weekend. I think they'll be a little bit confused about Charles being ahead of them. Being ahead of George.
Well, I think Ferrari are probably a bit confused.
No, they probably are. I think Charles seemed a little bit confused.
I mean, Charles was asked, and he was like, "Well, I didn't expect to be anywhere near this," so he was delighted.
But I don't think. I think Mercedes will still be like. That's a fairly decent weekend.
They've had a very strong start to the season. George has been very, very consistent. Picked up very, very good points for the team. But again, Antonelli has been very solid. Very solid. Another 8 points for him yesterday. He's doing everything right. He's not too far behind George. He's there. He's actually challenging. And it's good. I think he'll just continue to grow.
Yeah. Antonelli is doing, I think, what everyone expects at the moment. You don't expect him to be beating George Russell week in, week out. No. But you also don't expect him to be miles off him.
No.
And, George has been significantly better than Antonelli this season. But that's fine because Antonelli has still been getting the places that he should be getting.
But you will expect that,
He's 18 years old.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are.
And he's still studying for exams.
Yeah, no one is coming in at that age and beating an experienced driver like George Russell.
No.
It's just not happening.
Right, McLaren. Okay. I've got something to say. Okay. Mm-hmm. So on the podcast for a while, I get a lot of stick for my opinions on Lando. I don't hate Lando. I don't have an agenda against Lando, but I've always stood by my opinions of Lando that I do not think he will win a world championship this year, and I don't personally think he will ever win a world championship. That's not me trying to be harsh. That's not me trying to actually say Lando's a bad driver. I just don't think he has it in him to go on to the next level to become a world champion. This weekend was another prime example of that actually these mistakes that he makes cost him. And you look at the contrast between Oscar Piastri and him. Oscar Piastri, again, showed he's won 3 out of 5 races this year, okay? He is composed. He is solid. He's obviously just doing a fantastic job. He's maximising the most out of it. He's done a fantastic job. And you look at Lando Norris, and I generally think people are starting to see that actually maybe Lando isn't as good as what we thought compared to Oscar. Because we've sat on this podcast many times and you've told me I'm talking rubbish. Oscar Piastri will not win a championship before Lando Norris. If anyone's going to win a world championship in that McLaren, it'd be Lando Norris. I
still stand by that point, but I certainly don't think Lando is a much better driver than Oscar Piastri. I think we're probably going to see a very big... I think we're going to see a good battle for the championship this season. I think you can't deny that on his day, Lando Norris is a quicker driver. The problem is he doesn't seem to have the bottle. He is so error prone when it matters. And it is like a pressure thing.
Lando Norris is a phenomenal driver. He's quick. He's got the pace. And on his day, he's unbeatable. I do truly believe that. The issue is he is not consistent enough with that.
He's his own worst enemy.
He is. This weekend, again, as I said, was a prime example of that. Qualifying, Q1, Q2, very strong, okay? Gets to Q3, bottles it, puts it in the wall.
On his banker lap as well.
On his banker lap. He's putting in, he starts P10, okay? Oscar Piastri doesn't fumble under pressure. We very rarely see him fumble under pressure.
No, he's deadpan.
He's cool. More composed. And this weekend, again, I've got a question for you. That start, okay, into turn 1, would Lando Norris have backed off into turn 1? Yes or no?
I don't believe so.
Oh, come off it. Lando Norris would have backed off and let Max go into turn 1 yesterday. Oscar Piastri took it to Max yesterday, and Max did not like that. Lando Norris would not have done that. I truly believe that. And I'm not saying Lando Norris is, but I think he's so risk averse, he would not have gone into that. He would have avoided that to make sure that he didn't collide.
I think perhaps maybe on the basis that it was Max. I mean, I don't think that's a Lando thing. I think it's knowing what Max can be like. And you have to think, is it worth me entering this corner with Max, knowing that it could go horribly wrong? I feel like if that was like Max in a 2023 car or 2024, he would have turned in, they would have crashed. I don't think he would have took avoiding action. But I think Lando does race hard. And look, I am not a fan of Lando Norris, but I do think that in terms of ability, he's the quicker driver. But a lot comes from composure and mentality. That really helps you win championships. And Oscar is definitely ahead in that department. And Oscar is also very quick. It's not like Lando is significantly faster than him. I just think over a season, if there was no pressure for anything, Lando Norris would finish ahead of Oscar Piastri. But he does crumble. I don't know what it is, but he can't hack it. And I genuinely thought after last season he'd come into this season having learnt a lot, and I thought he'd really have the composure. And it does seem that he hasn't.
And don't get me wrong, we're still early in the season with 5 races in.
There's a lot of time to go.
Oscar's won 3 out of 5, Lando's won 1, and Max has won 1, okay? This weekend with Lando, if Max Verstappen was in that McLaren and he was starting P10, I guarantee Max Verstappen would have won that race this weekend, or a P2.
No, he wins.
Everyone's going on about how Lando was the driver of the day, a phenomenal drive coming from P10 to P4. Let's just not forget, okay, 2 of the cars in front of him crashed on lap 1. He gained 2 places. Realistically, he gained 4 places in that race. I don't think that was a phenomenal drive from Lando. And if you're a world championship, you want to be a world champion, and you're going for that title, you win that race on that day.
I'm not being funny. If you're a world champion, you can't be getting caught out by Lewis pulling that DRS trick on you.
No.
Twice, 2 laps in a row, which potentially cost him overtaking Max Verstappen. Charles Leclerc, sorry. It's unbelievable that he got done like that twice.
And look, as I said before, I don't hate Lando. I don't have an agenda. I'm just saying what it is, okay? And you can agree, you can disagree with me on this one. But Lando Norris should have been on that podium yesterday, at least on that podium yesterday. And this whole thing of like, he did a great job coming from P10 to P4. No, he didn't. He didn't do a good job.
He's in the quickest car.
Max
Verstappen came from P17 to win the race in Brazil. Granted, rainy conditions, things happen, but that's a world championship drive.
Yeah. And this is another example yesterday of why I don't think Lando will be a world champion. But you also look at it and go, he should have gone past Leclerc. How's Leclerc on the worst tyre in theory on those hards? Lando Norris being on those mediums. How is Leclerc pulling away from him? Do you see what I mean? Like, how is that happening? But Lando.
Well, but Lando came out after and said, I don't know why people keep saying stuff like this. Like the Ferraris and Red Bulls are on par with us.
They're just not.
It's just not true.
No.
That is simply not true. That McLaren is the quickest car. Because he also came out and said Max was the quickest man on the grid today. And someone said it to Oscar Piastri, and he was like, no.
No. Oscar was honest in the sense of, we had the quickest car.
Yeah.
And they did have the quickest car. I don't know if Lando still has that, meme in the past of when he said,
Have you got it? Can you pull it up?
What's that?
Guys, the one that was sent in the chat. When Lewis was winning everything. And it's a prime example of what we say, how you need the best car partnered with the best driver.
So back in 2022, Lando Norris said Lewis Hamilton's record...
This would have been way before then.
No, 2020. So did I say 22?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So back in 2020, Norris said Hamilton's car should win every race. He only has to beat 2 drivers, which is, and I don't know
Lando,
if that's.
You've only got to beat one driver, and that's your teammate, because your car is better than every car on the grid. What's happened there?
I wish your SD card does full.
Mine?
Yeah.
How's that happened?
I don't know. But we'll just keep recording anyway.
Yeah, apologies there. One of our cameras just died, but we are back up and running.
Yeah. What were you saying about Lando?
Lando Norris only has to beat one driver. The car is the quickest on the grid. There's also, by the way, there's zero shame in having the quickest car. If anything, it's something to be proud of. Yeah, this is my team. They've built the quickest car. Now, it's my job as the driver to make sure I'm winning every single race. And it's just not happening. I think that's why he gets a bit defensive about it. There's no way this quote hasn't come back to haunt him, by the way.
Well, that's probably why he keeps saying that he doesn't have the fastest car.
But they do. They know it. The team know it. Everyone knows it. And look, I stand by it. I still think Lando's still my favourite for the championship. But yeah, he's got to get this chip off his shoulder.
Do let us know who is winning the championship. So looking at the standings right now, Oscar Piastri leads. For the first time an Australian driver has led the championship since what year?
2011.
2010.
I was close.
You were close.
I knew it was Mark Webber.
Yeah, well done. Yeah. So
it could have been Danny Rick.
It could have been.
It wouldn't have been.
Oscar Piastri is leading with 99 points. Lando Norris is in second with 89 points. Max Verstappen, 87 points. Okay, I'm going to say something very controversial here. You say that Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri are the ones who are fighting for the championship, okay? My personal opinion is the ones we got to watch out for is Max Verstappen and Oscar Piastri. That is where the battle is going to be this year.
I think look, Oscar and Lando are your favourites because of the car.
Yeah.
But Max Verstappen is 100% there. And I still think George Russell is.
Yeah. George Russell is still there. Yeah, I agree with you on that one. Standings, constructors, McLaren 188 points, Mercedes 111, Red Bull 89 points. This is where it goes down to a Red Bull. They're missing that second driver, picking up those points. Williams are in P5 with 25 points, Haas P6 with 20.
P4?
Sorry, Ferrari 78 points. Trying to erase that from my memory, that Ferrari there. But everyone has got points. Alpine there, P9, 6 points. Sauber 6 points as well. It's going to be an exciting season. It's going to be changing a lot. And obviously we're going to Miami next, which obviously is where Lando Norris won his first race.
Yeah.
Another interesting fact. So Oscar Piastri's win this weekend now puts him on level with the same number of wins that Lando Norris has.
Yeah.
Granted, you could say Oscar Piastri has had the better car for his career.
Yep.
But isn't it mental that Lando Norris has been in the sport this long, and both of them, I think it's something like 80 races more than Oscar Piastri, and they still have the same number of wins?
Yeah, to some extent. I think it's... Oscar's been a lot more fortunate.
Okay.
Well, in the sense that he came in and had, pretty much half a season with a bad car.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree with that one.
I don't mean fortunate in how he's got his race wins. He's been great.
I was going to say, that's going to be quite a different discussion.
No. But, Lando had a lot of time in McLaren where they really weren't striking the right chord. Mm-hmm. But he did have opportunities to win races. Russia, Monza. And there was always that hype around him of, wow, Lando's so good. And he had never lived up to that at that point, in my opinion.
No.
But, I stand by, I think he's the favourite still for the championship. But if he throws in a couple more bottles, I will probably change that to Piastri. Because, like I say, it's as much mentality as it is skill.
So you're going to come over to my side?
Perhaps, at some point.
But that'd be 2 things you'd be wrong with this year.
What else?
You said Behrman was going to have a shocker.
Yeah, I admitted I was wrong.
And, potentially Piastri. Because you've laughed at me when I've said, at the beginning of the season, and I only watched this clip the other day. We said, who is going to win the World Championship? And I said, and you went, don't say it. I said Oscar Piastri.
What's going to happen when I'm right?
Then I will hands down.
Or when we're both wrong and Max wins it.
Then we wouldn't be surprised. Look, I want Lando to do well, and I generally do mean that, because there's nothing worse, and I feel really sorry for him because it must be horrible. As a driver, right, you work your arse off throughout your career to become a world champion. You have the pace, you have the talent, but it's the mentality that causes you to
like when it's
crumble.
You that keeps choking it. It's, like it must be infuriating because you can't look to an external circumstance and be like, oh, fuck that guy. He ruined that for me. Unless he's looking in the mirror, that's the only time he can say that.
Yeah, but it's Lando who is causing his own mistakes and his own downfall, and it is sad to see. You
say downfall. He's literally second in the championship.
No, okay,
by 10 points.
But his mistakes. That's what I mean. But his downfall. What I mean is his mistakes.
He should be leading this championship
comfortably.
And that's what I mean when I say on pace, he is the quicker driver.
Yeah,
but you have to have the mentality to back it up,
and you have to be consistent, and you have to be. Everyone goes on about Australia where Lando won the race. Oh, he was a phenomenal. Lando Norris went off that track as well. It was only Oscar Piastri got that bit of unluck that he spun into the final corner. And I know you need a bit of luck, but Lando also went off in that. Oscar, if he had stayed on the track, could have gone through and won that race as well. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's such a
circumstantial.
Yeah,
in a sense.
It's like if your grandma had wheels, she'd be a bike. Like it's irrelevant, isn't it? Because Lando didn't spin off.
No.
Oscar did.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's going to be an interesting season. I'm looking forward to it. Obviously, Miami will be next. We'll be back next week previewing Miami.
Yeah.
It's good to be back.
It is.
It's nice to be back. Happy birthday again.
Thank you, everyone.
Make sure you check us out on all social media. TikTok, Instagram. We post daily on that. Also Twitter, YouTube. So yeah, check us out. And we'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Bye-bye.